Welcome to the My House Podcast, a show about the past, present, and future goings-on at the My House Youth Drop-In Center in Wasilla, Alaska, with your host, Michelle Overstreet.
Hi, welcome to the My House Podcast. This is Michelle Overstreet, and my guest today is David Balmer. He's a My House board member and active in volunteer capacity in a number of ways, avid outdoorsman and ex-F-22 fighter pilot also.
That's right, retired.
That's very,
right.
Very amazing retirement party. I'll never forget that. It was really, really fun. So thank you for joining me today. I invited David because we have been talking about a couple different things. We had a recent experience with a funder who asked, we have a rapidly disappearing fund that has been like a contingency fund, emergency fund that we built up over the last decade. And that fund was really started by a man named John James Bornman, who lived in Big Lake and was a mechanic, and who left us $250,000 and said, I want you to use this to have as an emergency fund to take care of kids. There was a local financial advisor that helped us receive that when it was time, when he passed away. And since then, we had two additional donors. We had John Northcutt, who was a longtime donor while he was alive. He was an art collector and donated amazing art for fundraisers that we did, like Rotary and Cork. And then when he passed away, he left us $100,000. So that also went into our fund. And then a local person whose family owned Great Northern Engineering for a lot of years, Cheryl Riggs, donated another $100,000 plus as part of her legacy of My House. And she was such a great encourager for me in the early days and just kept saying, you're doing great, just keep going, it's working. And so I really wanted to talk with David today about legacy giving and also take the opportunity to recognize those three people who amongst themselves donated over $500,000 that contributed to a fund that today, as our organization is growing and we're working and waiting on funders to help us with our growth into a big building and develop our programs and help people from other communities develop programs like this, to say thank you to them for this fund that is backfilling positions as we grow.
Yeah, I think that is it's a wonderful thing that they do. And I think what we're trying to highlight today is just to bring awareness to what you can do. There's a couple of things that I've seen, and we can talk about them, but one is giving while you're alive. I do want to address that a little bit, but I think it's what you're highlighting is a lot of people just assume, well, I want to leave my estate to my kids. And that may be the right thing to do. But I don't think there's anything wrong with leaving some of it to a charitable organization like My House, especially one that works so hard to help youth. And so I think we want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And I think starting with the people that have done it for us is a great way to open that conversation. We're very grateful for those.
Yeah, there's legacy within your family and there's legacy within your community. And yeah. I think investing in the causes that are near and dear to your heart is part of that community legacy.
I agree. If you're okay with that, I actually want to start with something that I've talked with a lot of people about while you're still alive, if you don't mind, and then we can transition a little bit more to the estate piece. When you're alive, if you get, we're working on changing it, but these days around 73 to 75, if you have a big IRA or a 401k you worked for all those years, what a lot of people are surprised by is they get into their 70s and suddenly maybe their financial advisor calls them up or their financial institution and goes, hey, you've got to take a bunch of money out of your IRA or your 401k. And a lot of people go, wait a minute, I have to do what? In fairness, no one's ever paid taxes on that money. So somebody's got to pay taxes, and that's the government's way to try to get you to pay taxes. So a really cool thing that people are often not aware of is something called qualified charitable distribution. If you're in a position, and you can actually start it at age 70 and a half, which is pretty cool. Not everybody knows that. Even if you don't have to start taking your withdrawals until 73, you can actually start making charitable contributions out of your IRA at 70 and a half. That one kind of got away from Congress. It's the only thing that's ever gotten away from Congress, but we'll leave that one alone. What happens is if let's just make up some numbers. Let's say you have to take $20,000 out of your IRA for a year, and that's not an entirely unreasonable number. Now, there's a lot of people that have that and much more that they need to take out. If you'd like to, you can actually send that money directly from your IRA, from your 401k, whatever it is, directly to any 501c3. And your financial institution can help you do that. They literally just write a check out of the account. You never see that. It doesn't come to you. And so what happens is that fulfills your annual requirement for withdrawals or whatever portion that you choose to do.
And so you don't pay the taxes on it and you gift it to
That's
someone.
right. So basically it goes directly to the organization. No one has to pay taxes. Now, of course, that's money that could have come to you. But if you don't need that, you might as well give it to a charitable organization, one that you believe in. And of course, I believe in my house, as we do here. I'm allowed to say that and being on the board.
You are.
So that, I think, is a really neat opportunity to kind of, use the old phrase, give God what is God's, give Caesar what is Caesar's, right?
Right.
You can actually avoid giving Caesar anything if that's what you want to do in this case. It just goes directly to the nonprofit of your choice.
How awesome. What great information.
It's a really neat capability, and not everybody knows that. And I would say what we've seen is that the older generation didn't have things like Roth IRAs. Our generation has that. I know in my family, we're really trying to use the Roth IRA and some of those things because I'd like to not pay as much in taxes when I get to retirement. So we won't probably have as much of that problem. When I know my parents, there wasn't a Roth when Dad started his career in saving. It was just all a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k if you're used to those things, right?
Or a pension. People have pensions, right?
Yeah. If you have a pension, that's the best news of all, right? Those are really hard to come by. And so that was the 401k, the IRA kind of replaced the pension in a lot of ways. But it wasn't until the last, couple of decades that the Roth really became in vogue and an option. So a lot of our parents and grandparents now, they've got these big IRAs, and we're finding not a lot of people need the money that has to come out of them.
Wow.
And so there's actually, I can't remember, I'd love to quote you the statistic, but a large percentage of people that have required distributions, they're not actually using them for themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's been, and so that's why some of the legislation has changed to make the age older so that you don't have to take it out quite as soon. So not to bore with the details, but sometimes the details matter. And these are things that people are thinking about more these days, if you will.
Yeah. I really like the idea that there are so many choices. I don't think our parents and grandparents had all the choices that we have for different ways of giving, and we have a lot of people who volunteer here that are older. I think our generation has more choices, more ways to give.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to introduce another one that I think is fantastic. And again, it's a little bit more technical, so I'll just give the basics. You can do something like a charitable remainder trust or a donor-advised fund. There's some similar type of concepts. This one, if you're like a business owner and you're getting ready to retire or something like that, and you find, my gosh, I'm going to sell my business, I'm going to sell my house, maybe I'm going to get $1 million, or maybe more, in every situation's different. A way to help avoid taxes in that year is if you give a big chunk into what we call, I've heard them call it a donor-advised fund. Let's just use that. Charitable remainder trust, I think, is somewhat similar. If you give money to that, then you can take a pretty big tax break in that year. So you can do a big kind of annual tax break. What's really cool about a donor-advised fund, for instance, then, is that you put the money in a year, but you don't have to give it away that year.
wow.
Yeah, you can actually give it away in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So you get the tax break in a year, but you can kind of have like a mini family, a donor advised fund or whatever you want to call it, that you can give away in future years. So you can say, I want to put a bunch of money in now when I sell my business. And then for the next 10 years, I want to give 10% of that out to different charities or whatever, if you will. it's a pretty cool concept.
That's amazing.
And you can go the other way with it too. If you're someone that wants to give a bunch of money away in 1 year, you can supplement it over 10 years, and now it's grown tax-free inside that. And now you've grown it all these years, and now you can give a bigger number away to a charity of your choice.
That's really neat. What a cool thing.
It's a cool concept. It doesn't work for everybody, but when it's appropriate, it's a very elegant solution.
And can families contribute to that as a group?
You'd have to work, with your financial advisor, your CPA on that. Every one of them is going to have a little bit different rules. But the person making a contribution, it would be the one getting the tax break on it.
Oh, I got you.
And so just be cautious because there are a lot of rules around it. We're not going to go through all those today. This is kind of one of those ask your doctor if I should take, right? Ask your doctor, should I do a donor advice
Get a physical first.
That's right. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your financial advisor.
So. I like that. Well, it's exciting. I think that, the people that I mentioned earlier that were part of we were benefactors of their trust. And after they passed away, they left us with funding, has really kept our doors open in a lot of ways. And I think, the guy that was the artist said, just use it when you need it. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a nice thing to say. And in the back of my mind, it was always like, gosh, I hope I don't need it. Mm-hmm. And then we get into a situation, right now where we're using reserves. And I think he would think this would be a legitimate, I need it opportunity, right? We're growing programs to go into a big building and helping more kids than we've helped in the past. And so it's very exciting for us to be honored with those kinds of donations. And it's really a sustainability gift.
Yeah.
In the long term. So I thought it would be interesting just to have information about that. One, I love to give a shout out to the people who have done that already. Yeah. And two, sometimes people ask, where did you get the money for your financial reserve? If you're a nonprofit, should you really have a financial reserve? Yeah. And I've had that conversation with several people and most recently somebody who is a funder. And sometimes we've been able to put money in the financial reserve when we had money from the cafe and the boutique that came in that was earned revenue that we didn't need to put elsewhere if our training costs were covered, earned money with our businesses that we were able to put in there and little by little, grow it. So it's been fun to see that grow. It makes me sad when it goes down, but it also makes me feel good that we're not in a crisis.
Yeah, I think I would, I want to address what you just said. People say, well, should a nonprofit have an emergency fund? I think a nonprofit needs an emergency fund more than anybody, right? We're counting on community involvement and engagement and federal funds and grants, and sometimes those things are variable on both sides of that. I think it's very wise to have that. I think it should be a requirement. And as a board member, I'll tell you, it gives me a lot of comfort when we sit down and we go through our financials like we do diligently, and we know, okay, in a rainy day, we're not going to have to close the doors on these kids that need help because we've worked to build that and because people believe in what we do and have left money for us. So I think it's fantastic. I think it's a necessity.
Well, I do too. And can I tell you when it first became a real necessity? When COVID happened.
That's right.
And everyone closed their doors. All the service providers closed their doors. I was getting emails saying you must shut down. And I would have a cafe with 3 or 4 kids that had nowhere to go. And we didn't shut down for COVID. We used our reserves. You're right. The federal distributions for grants sometimes were 9 months behind. Yep. And we waited 9 months for grant payments that prior to that had come every month. And so we, again, used our reserves. We served over 1,000 meals through the drive-through window in our cafe. We handed meals out the window to kids because they couldn't gather up for supper club like they do today. Yeah. We had our housing had air filters and cleaning, and our case managers were in 2 shifts, and they cleaned between the shifts. So if one shift went down, we had the other one. Hardly anyone got sick. We didn't have a big epidemic of COVID that came through the building, we would have someone who traveled and then they would get sick and stay home. But we were able to stay open that entire time, extend our hours, and offer more services for youth because we had that reserve.
Yep. In fact, even we were just talking today, last couple of weeks, another organization couldn't serve all the kids, and we took them in.
That's correct.
We want to be, the doors are open no matter what.
Yes.
Because we don't ever want to turn kids away.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
It's important, and it's also, I think it's also really relevant when it comes to kids believing that we are what we say we are.
Yeah.
And we can't say we help you when it's convenient. Most of the time when they need help, it's not convenient for anyone. And sometimes their needs are really great, and it becomes important to be able to triage that, whether it's crisis stabilization, a medical situation, or just a loss. I mean, we have kids that come in here whose both parents are deceased, and they have no siblings, aunts, or uncles, and they're literally alone. Yeah. And so it becomes really important to remain available.
I think a lot of these kids, so many of them, everybody's let them down. Nobody's done what they said they were going to do. So if we say we're going to be here for them, we have to be here for them.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Let's
talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about the legacy giving. I think a way to think about giving when you're gone is to really think about whatever resources, assets you have. Everything that you have goes to three people. It goes to either your kids or to a charity or to Uncle Sam. Those are the only three options. What's interesting is that the more you leave in general terms to a nonprofit, the less goes to Uncle Sam. In a lot of cases, and depending on how your situation is set up, right, you can give your kids money in such a way that none of it goes to Uncle Sam. You know, things like insurance come to mind, right? That's always going to be a tax-free transfer to your kids. So there are ways to give your kids money without Uncle Sam getting any of it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't give Uncle Sam anything, but you might want to control that conversation, right? We don't want that to get out of control. So anything that you give to charity, Uncle Sam doesn't get to touch. And so think about, let's go back to that IRA or that 401k we were talking about. If that money has never been taxed, when you pass away, it's going to be taxed. That's just the way it is. And so you can, just like we talked about with the required distributions when you're 73, you can leave money even when you're gone, like we've seen here, to a nonprofit organization. And so I'm going to paint you a funny picture. Let's just say that you have $1 million IRA. And let's say that you're taking withdrawals out of that. You could actually do something fun like buy an insurance policy for your kids. That money goes to them tax-free. And then the IRA goes to the charity. So now actually the kids get the basically the proceeds from the insurance. They don't have to pay any taxes on that. And now the full IRA or 401k goes to charity, to a 501c3. Uncle Sam actually doesn't inherit any of your money.
Wow.
It's a neat concept. And so sometimes I think people just get a little too focused on, hey, I just want to give my kids a bunch of money. That's great. I don't have the study in front of me, but one that I'd read was that the average inheritance lasts somewhere to 2.5 to 3 years. Think about that. If you're giving your kids money that they didn't earn, I think sometimes that just registers a little different in somebody's brain. If somebody else earned the money and gives it to you, it just doesn't have the same kind of attachment, I think, in a good way for you. And so, you know, we see a lot that inheritances just kind of go out the door.
Wow.
Sometimes it's more important to the parents than it is to the kids who are receiving it. That's not always the case, and I make no judgments on anyone's family. I'm just encouraging people to think about, in addition to giving to your own kids and making sure they're set up, give to a nonprofit when you're gone. And the more that you do that, the more you disinherit Uncle Sam, is a kind of a funny way to put it.
That is fascinating.
Now, this comes from a guy who flew F-22s, and Uncle Sam paid my paycheck. So don't completely disinherit Uncle Sam, because we need F-22s and those kind of things. But like I said, you just want to be thoughtful on how you're doing it and try to have some understanding of what the tax consequences will be when you're gone. And giving to a charity you believe in is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I love the idea of that community legacy and being able to spread it out a little bit more personally. I think there's tremendous value in that to your community and to your family.
And it's interesting that you say that. Here we are talking about just a few really key people that have given to my house. For us, when that money comes in, that's very important to us.
Oh, it's huge.
It's we take it very seriously, and not to say that kids don't, but for us, we view that as a huge blessing and a gift, and we treat it very sacredly, if that's the right word.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I mean? To make sure it's wisely spent and wisely used, and so I think if that's in your heart to give, leaving it behind when you don't need it anymore is awesome. As a sidebar, my favorite quote about Rockefeller, do you know what somebody asked his CPA when he was gone, how much money he left behind? Do you know what the CPA said?
No.
All of it.
All of it,
right? Isn't that the perspective? Like, we worry about it, we think about it, and then when you're gone, if you can leave a legacy, then your name continues on, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. And I think in the big picture of things, for me, there are people that you kind of expect will think about that and do that. And one of the things that I think about the people on my small little list is they weren't necessarily people that anyone expected to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't know John James Bornman that left us $250,000.
Yeah.
I felt sad when he was gone. I didn't know him, and I felt sad because I would have liked to have known him.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to know that? Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful story. I can't remember the guy's name, but his obituary read something like auto mechanic, a nighttime janitor at the high school, philanthropist.
Right.
He worked really, really hard. He saved his money, and when he died, he left $7 million to a charity.
Oh my gosh!
Wouldn't you have loved to talk to that guy?
I would have loved to talk to that guy.
Yeah.
It's funny. The older I get, I think the less I really need. My staff makes fun of me a little bit because I frequently am identified as having the oldest and possibly the junkiest vehicle in the parking lot.
I will say I saw your rims today. They do need upgrading. I'll give them that.
And I just have never, I've just never had a big thing about I have to have the fancy, car, for example. Does it run? Does it get me where I want to go? Can I load it up with all the stuff that I want to haul around? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
In fact, I bought a new car earlier this year and no one noticed, because it was exactly like my old car.
That's funny.
It was just a newer version, the same color, and it wasn't breaking down all the time.
That's
and
hilarious.
So somebody came to work and said, "Did you get the exact same car as your old car?" And I said, "I did. It worked good.
That's hilarious.
It was a good car."
That's hilarious.
And so I giggle about that because I think when I was younger, I did want things that were, that were more status status things. And the older I get, the less that matters.
Yeah.
And the more I value the community aspect of things. And so maybe there's a maturity piece to it, but I'm really grateful for the information that you shared. I think that this can help people change the way that they think about whether their money's going to go to taxes or whether they just do a little bit of strategizing with a financial planner and have a plan for avoiding some of the taxes and really gifting charities that they believe in and that they want to continue on.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fairness, the caveat to what you said is I still have 3 kids at home, so I'm not spending less than I used to.
Oh my gosh.
We're doing soccer and baseball and all those things.
You're meeting yourself coming and going and
right.
adding seats in the back for the other kids that are riding with you on the carpool.
But I do want to resonate. I think that I hadn't really thought of that term until today. That it's that community legacy. That's just as important, I think, as the family legacy. And in some cases, maybe more. And I think that if you're, for us, we're trying to raise our kids to be givers.
Right.
We try to build that into the salary we pay them to do work at home and those kind of things. And they're getting that, let's call it what it is. It's an endorphin high from giving.
Yes.
It's a wonderful thing. And so my hope is that they're engaged and involved in that. So if you are if they find out that I've left some of the money to a charity and not all to them, I hope that would be a no-brainer to them. They would go, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's who we would like them to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your energy and for being part of our podcast. I'm Michelle Overstreet, and thank you to my guest, Dave Balmer. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being a part of our world and our board.
My pleasure, and thank you to the My House Cafe for supplying lunch that we had prior. It was delicious. If you haven't had any, come down and get some.
Oh, they have such good food.
It's the best.
So good.